All right, we're back with another episode, and I want to talk a little bit about ZYN. But before I do, we got Kevin on my right, back for another episode. And one thing that I've kind of noticed, Kevin, is like when I walk through the office in the morning, there's ZYN tins on ZYN tins. That's interesting.
Yeah.
There's tins of ZYN on almost every single desk. Definitely all the males, no question.
I'm doing it right now.
I know you have ZYN right there on your desk. Do you have one in right now?
Well, maybe.
Do you actually have one in?
I do.
I should have put one in for the episode. I just feel like 10 minutes into the episode, I probably couldn't have finished.
Yeah,
so
I don't want to
get
you hooked on it anyways.
But back to my thought of like, I've seen ZYN so much in this office, and I've started to ask people that work here why they do it. And so I haven't seen a lot of this on the internet. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. So I thought it'd be an interesting conversation to just kind of talk about ZYN more general. And the one thing that I think is the most interesting is social media has essentially made ZYN what it is today. Social media and some of the Zynfluencers, which you were calling it earlier, has really made this brand. And I think it's like a little bit of a testament of how powerful the internet is, especially for some consumer brands like ZYN. And if you don't know what ZYN is, just to kind of give you guys an idea, it is nicotine in a pouch. And the idea around it was like they wanted to essentially kill vaping, and they wanted to put nicotine in a pouch, which has went just actual gangbusters since they did it. And there's been a ton of influencers talking about it. It says on my sheet here, there's 132 million cans sold in the United States. Mm-hmm. And that was just last year. Oh, that was in Q1. There's 132 million cans sold this year, which is way up from last year, which is just interesting in 80%. Itself. And I'd imagine that social media had a lot to do with this.
And just last week, I hate to interrupt, but just last week, because I'm a cool mint guy. I'm a cool mint guy, and boy, I showed it.
What is it? Is it 5 or 10?
It's the 6. So okay. I'm a cool mint guy, and there's been a shortage of the flavored ones. They're on back order, exactly. Yeah. And it wouldn't be such a big deal, but it's nicotine. So in the state of California, I'm forced to get the smooths, the unflavored, right? Which it's not a huge deal for everybody, but there has been a shortage, like just last week. You know?
Interesting. Why? Okay.
They can't print it.
First of all, when did you start zinning, and how long?
Oh, that's a good, probably like.
I guess that was the same question.
No, yeah, probably like 2 years ago, and it was because I was vaping so much, and I'd never been a vapor, and I knew that it was horrible for me. I was feeling terrible, and it really did get me off of it. I'm watching so many videos of the people saying the same thing that I'm like, oh, they're shilling this. I think it's more so like. It's gotten me to a point where I'm like, okay with it. I want to get off of it. But
what was the reason that you started it? Did you see a creator talk about it? Was it a word of mouth, your friend?
Oh, definitely. Just like seeing it all over social media as like when I went to go and purchase one, right? Like I didn't know what to get. I just knew I'd heard about them, and I was like, oh, this is the one everyone's getting. And I think that's like a good point, is that like ZYN has become like the Kleenex or Band-Aid of nicotine pouches, right? Like no one's saying, oh, do you have a Rogue? Do you have a On or something? It's like, do you have a ZYN, right? Like that's what social media I think has done, and that's why I started.
There's a conversation that's going around in our office right now is some people think ZYN is gross, some people will stand by it. I think what is interesting is I don't see a lot of vapes in the office anymore.
Yeah.
Which I used to see people holding vapes constantly. Mm-hmm. So maybe it is a good thing. I was like thinking about this before we were filming the podcast. Is like, what are all the vices that a teenager, high school kid, college kid would be into? ZYN doesn't feel like it's that bad, which is maybe a controversial thing to say. But what's the alternative? They smoke cigarettes?
Yeah, right.
Which is way worse, in my opinion. And so I think as you think about this, like Philip Morris bought the company. They own Marlboro. They own a lot of cigarette companies. And what I thought was interesting is a large percentage of their business is actually now smokeless. So it's tobacco, or it's like nicotine gum. It's nicotine pouches, and they as a company are transitioning this way. And so that is something that I was thinking about before we were filming this podcast, is just like the old companies that were peddling cigarettes are now into this like new wave, which is pouches. And you said something too before, as you were like, I think 10 years from now, nobody will smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe you, but I see it. Like I could see how that could happen now with how popular ZYN has become.
When you were, showing me the Philip Morris site, I went to like look and see what are they saying about it. And like front and center is a quote from them that says, "We're building PMI, Philip Morris International's future on smoke-free products. That they're a better choice than cigarette smoking, and that these products will one day replace cigarettes." So it's like, whether or not that's true or not is like the fact that they're kind of saying it on their website and they're open about it. Like, I feel like big tobacco, which is what they are, you know, they're pretty open about that. That I think they think too that this is where it's going.
Yeah. And it just as I kind of think about social media and how it's played a big role in this, I see a lot of prominent creators. I know Tucker Carlson, but that's probably the first one that comes to mind, is the amount of times that I've watched an interview either with Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson. They almost always mention ZYN in some capacity.
Yeah.
And how it's helped them with brain fatigue. It like puts them in a different mindset of how they process information. And it seems like Tucker Carlson is at just the forefront of promoting ZYN. And then all the other creators that we're now seeing this, and you were showing me a list of creators on TikTok, Zynfluencers on TikTok, and just some of the ridiculous names on TikTok. But they're TikToks that are solely based around promoting ZYN.
Yeah.
And from what I saw and what I watched, I don't think any of them are actually getting paid. I think this is all like, they understand how popular the product has become. They understand how many people are buying it. And they know that they can pull views by making videos about ZYN. It's kind of like the Red Bull model for nicotine, where it's like Red Bull wasn't really paying anyone early on. And even to this day, they pay some action sports athletes and things like that. But a lot of people just casually drink Red Bull and make videos about Red Bull, and they don't get paid by the product. It's a little bit, we're seeing something very similar happening with ZYN right now, where it's like the product, look at this Garfield bus.
Oh, yeah.
Bro, what?
I need a picture of that.
There's literally it's literally a Garfield bus that has fuzz on the side of it. But yeah, that's I think that one of the interesting things about ZYN right now is people are just, creators are making free content because the brand is perceived as really cool.
Yeah.
And even in our office, like, it's not like you guys are hiding the fact that you guys are zinning.
Yeah.
They're on your desk. They're out for people to see. Like, I don't think most of you would have a box of cigarettes on your desk.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cool to have a box of,
Man,
maybe it was 20 years ago, but like to have a box of Marlboros on your desk. Like, imagine if I walked in and like you had like a massive tin of Marlboros. I would probably look at you and be like, what are you doing?
You should just start chain smoking on the podcast. Like, it's like Jimmy Carson, you know, like enjoying a fine cigarette. But I agree with you. Like, it's not perceived as like a disgusting behavior. It's like normalized on social media, right? You have a lot of like young influencers that are like, this is my first time trying a ZYN, and they haven't had to do any marketing behind it. It's like everyone has done it for them, right? And it's like it's socially accepted. And I think there's a lot of people that weren't using nicotine that probably are now, because it's like part of internet culture now.
Yeah. And this is the stat that you added in here. It says 2% of high school and middle schoolers reported using pouches last year. There ain't no way. 2%. Like, I'm pretty sure if you and I walked into a high school right now,
they're not snitching, you know. They don't.
I'm not being a snitch. Listen, if you're in high school, like, do you? I'm just saying, I think that number is significantly low. If I'm just thinking about my friends in high school, the amount of them that smoked weed or smoked cigarettes wasn't high, but it was way higher than 2%. And so I just think that's like, it's a little misleading. And it says 10% using vapes. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think we went from 10% of high school and middle school kids using or have used a vape down to 2% of using ZYNs. It's also way more discreet.
It is.
If you're a high school kid and you're taking a science, you know, you're in science class or you're in whatever class, and all of a sudden you have a ZYN in your upper deck. You know, it's like pretty easy to hide that from a teacher. Yeah,
it is. It's more easier than, you know, people were used to like vape into their backpacks. And I saw that on TikTok. It's like all the jewel culture that we used to see on TikTok is like shifted now to ZYN culture, where like people are taking their upper deckies out and like throwing them at the whiteboard and they stick to it, you know, like it's kind of like the next wave. And I think Philip Morris knows that, and they're looking at the future. Like, this is kind of where it's going.
Do you think it gets banned, or do you think flavored ZYNs become banned like it did with vape? Right. I remember Juul, you couldn't have at least in California, I don't think you can still have flavored jewel pods or even flavored pods for that matter.
Well, I know that like a big part of their struggle is that they've been trying to validate Zyn with like the FDA for a long time. And that's a big component of it is like the flavored part of it. So, you know, maybe they go to something where it's like they're flavored or available online, and then in stores it's the smooth and the unflavored ones. But when you look at the charts, and we'll put them here of like what's popular, the flavored ones are what's driving a lot of it, right? So I don't think that goes away. I think that they get a little craftier on getting FDA, you know, because it's unregulated right now, and they list what they have in it.
Yeah.
And it is better than a cigarette, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, it is. I guess you're still consuming nicotine.
Yeah.
So in some aspects, like of what's inside a cigarette, it is better than smoking a cigarette. But it's still putting nicotine in your body, which some people could argue good or bad. I don't know. But I think the most interesting thing for me as I kind of thought about this was just the sheer amount of social media posts that I see of people, creators, whatever, talking about Zyn. I don't think that slows down. I do think there becomes brands that come into the market that are like Zyn, that compete with Zyn, that maybe are equally as cool. And social media will have a lot to do with that, of why they become popular. But yeah, that's, and I know this isn't like a typical creator breakdown, but it's just something that I thought was really interesting, and something that I really don't see talked about enough outside of people promoting Zyn. Is like, why has this become so popular, and like, why is this now becoming such a hit in America? And will like THC pouches, caffeine pouches, like, are we going to see like other vices put into pouches, and is that going to become more prominent? I don't know if there probably is THC pouches out there that I just don't know about. I know I've seen caffeine pouches. But I think like, is the future of these substances, like in a pouch, in your upper deck, in your lip? I don't know. Probably
like the pouchification of everything.
Pouchification.
Right? Because a lot of those too, like, could be creator product, like caffeine. You can drink coffee and everything. So like, as a creator, I'd be looking at those opportunities as well, as like, if maybe it's not a Zyn thing, but you use a caffeine one that you really like we could probably end up seeing those.
Of course, CBD, THC, psilocybin. So I don't think this will slow down. I think social media just continues to help. But yeah, interesting topic. Something that, I've been thinking quite a bit about.
I wrote down some of my favorite names that I found on the internet.
I think Obi-Wan Zenobi is like the funniest.
I like Zinny the Pooh.
Zinny the Pooh, Zyn Indiana Jones. It has a pretty crazy culture on the internet right now.